Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second interview hosted by the PEX, the Public Education Exchange, where we connect with individuals and invite them to share their powerful insights and dialogues around public education. In our speaker series today, we have the pleasure of talking with Anya Guo. Anya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. My name is Anya, and I am the Vice President of Policy and Research at the Ontario Student Trustees Association, which is an organization of all of the elected student trustees in the secondary schools across Ontario.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, and let's get started. Okay, so to start off with, could you tell me a little bit about your role as a student trustee at the Ontario Student Trustee Association?
Yeah, so OSTA, or the Ontario Student Trustees Association, like I said, consists of all of the democratically elected student trustees from each public and Catholic school board in Ontario. Um, and we are the largest student stakeholder group in the province, and we advocate for over 2 million students in Ontario schools. And within OSTA, we have a leadership team, which consists of 13 appointed or elected student trustees who lead the advocacy and operations arms of the organization. So my role is Vice President of Policy and Research, which consists of coordinating policy-related projects and, more importantly, coordinating and leading the student storytelling projects to inform education policy and further OSTA's advocacy. So, for example, a pressing concern that has arisen this year for students is Bill 33. And so my main focus has been to do a lot of research and just reaching out to students to hear their perspectives and advocate for what we, the students, deserve.
That's wonderful, and that actually ties in very well with my next question. Recently, in your work, in your editorial, you discussed Bill 33, and you also just mentioned it. Could you briefly explain us what Bill 33 proposes?
Yeah, for sure. So, Bill 33, the Supporting Children and Students Act 2025, is a legislation that proposes significant changes to the education, child welfare, and post-secondary sectors in the province. And unfortunately, the bill was voted on and passed very recently on Wednesday, November 19th. But my main focus has been on the proposed changes to the Education Act, so I'll briefly go over some of those proposals. Um, so first of all, the way that school boards work is that each board has a board of trustees who are democratically elected by the communities that they represent. And within the board of trustees, there are 2 to 3 student trustees who are elected seniors, so grade 11 or 12, by their peers to sit on these board meetings and to provide a student perspective. But yeah, essentially, all trustees advocate for the very unique needs of the very different communities that they represent, and the board decisions are all made together by trustee vote. And so that's how our democratic education system has been functioning for over 2 centuries, I believe. But what Bill 33 proposes is the expansion of ministerial authority over school boards, which means that the Minister of Education would have the power to investigate school boards and appoint a provincial supervisor to take over a board's affairs if it is deemed a matter of public interest. And in the case that this happens, all trustees will be replaced by the single supervisor who is now in charge of all the decision making by themselves. And in fact, the Minister of Education, Paul Calandra, he has expressed his plans of eliminating trustees entirely as early as next year, which, along with passing this legislation, um, allowing for the government to basically take control of an entire school board, really shows how they're trying to centralize the education system and the governance model to give the government more power and control over our boards. And along with this, the bill allows for the province to take over decisions concerning student fees. So this includes decisions on which student fees are permitted, which ones are not, and how much to charge. And so with this, the government has the power to determine school resource funding, and that would affect all the crucial student supports that we currently have, such as menstrual equity initiatives, sexual violence supports, food banks, and so much more. And finally, I want to touch on another controversial proposal of Bill 33, which is the implementation of SROs or school resource officer programs, which would essentially require school boards to work with their local police and give the police access to school premises and access to participate in school programs. And the controversy behind this is that in recent years, several boards have discontinued their SRO programs, and this is due to all the negative feedback that they've received in their communities. So, specifically, we've seen evidence of the discriminatory and harmful impacts on racialized students, especially when allowing police into school grounds. And so, despite this, Bill 33 would reintroduce police SRO programs into all schools across Ontario.
Mhm. These are some really eye-opening details, so thank you for sharing that. And I feel like this just goes to show how it's not just trustees being impacted by it, but students, right? So there's so many levels of impact and so many different people and so many different groups being impacted by this bill. So yeah, thank you for sharing those details. As a student trustee, I know you kind of touched on this, but what part of the bill do you specifically find most concerning?
hmm well, to me, the entirety of the bill is, to say the least, very concerning. But coming from a student perspective, I think it's extremely concerning and disappointing how the government has been handling the entire process. So many organizations, communities, individuals, concerned parents and students have been voicing their opinions and advocating against the bill. But not only has the government refused to address our concerns, they've knowingly eliminated opportunities for debate and for community input. And it's really concerning to me that not only has the government intentionally disregarded the opinions of the people that this bill would affect, they've done everything. They've shortened debates and they've bypassed committee hearings to make sure that there are no opportunities for anyone to slow down the process and to fight against the bill. And I think that what makes it worse is that what has been happening now is very much representative of what will happen in the future if the when the bill is passed implemented, um, because the bill allows for the government to take over any school board, and when the power is handed over to them, communities will lose their voices and students will lose their ability to provide input into these decisions. And the government claims that this bill shows that they care about us and that they want to listen and support us, but the way that they have disregarded the input from students, parents, and communities during this entire process is really, to me, an early indication of how a centralized education system in their hands would run and affect us.
So that was actually the next question I was going to ask you. I was going to say, how does it undermine the rights of students? And you mentioned that I feel like overall, what you mentioned was that it just kind of like silences their voices, their opinions, on how things in the education system should work, right? And that they do offer a very crucial opinion and perspective because it's affecting them, right? So that was a very valuable point. Now, if we were move towards more of like a perspective of advocacy, how do you think that students, student trustees, and just in general, any other advocates in the community, how can they work together to respond to this bill, which is already passed, right? And also ensure that their voices, local voices, are being heard.
Yeah, I think that even though this bill has passed, there is still so much that students, parents, and communities can do to make sure that our voices are heard. And I think one of the most important things is to continue to work together and to organize ourselves in ways that make it impossible for these decision makers to ignore us. Um, because especially as students, we make up the largest group in the education system. And so if we speak up collectively, there is an endless amount of possibilities for what we could do together. Like I've been involved with OSTA and with fellow student trustees under supervision, and we've been working really hard to just spread the word and to make sure that every student is aware of Bill 33 and what it does to our education system. And we've already seen so much progress. There's so many individuals speaking up, so many organizations that are coming together to fight the bill. There's more and more news coverage on this issue. And I think that even though the bill has been passed, people need to realize that that doesn't limit the ability of students and communities to speak and to organize and to advocate. And even if you're not comfortable with speaking out publicly or on social media or to the press, there's still so many ways that you can participate in fighting against this bill. You can sign petitions, participate in phones apps, and all the MPPs have their contact informations, which are accessible to the public. But beyond that, I think it's just so important for students and parents to just stay informed, because staying informed is one of the most powerful things that communities can do. And understanding what's happening, talking about it with your peers, and making sure that others know how these changes affect us, can really help to build that movement that we need moving on. And because at the end of the day, even though things are changing, the vast majority of the people who make up this education system, the students, the families, the educators, the communities, we still have that voice. And when we work together and when we organize ourselves and support each other, that voice, I truly believe, is strong enough to push for a more transparent and accountable system that really reflects our needs.
No, and that's so powerful. And I love how you emphasize the idea of being informed and also educating as a big part of what it means to advocate. And I know, like for myself, I've been, on campus, I see posters about Bill 33, and, they just talk about how Bill 33, undermines the rights of students and stuff like that. So, I feel like that spreading awareness in big or small ways, it just has an impact, and it definitely does keep people informed, people of all groups. So that was definitely a very helpful kind of approach to how we can respond to this bill and advocate. So to wrap up, thanks so much, Anya, again for being part of this conversation and for really taking the time to share your experiences and your perspective as a student trustee and as a student. And for our audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next conversation in our speaker series. And if you would like to keep up with the PEX project, our updates, our events, and news stories, just scan the QR code on the screen to check out our website, which features all of this. Thanks so much again.